So I'm doing something weird and making a mess. I got an old 27-inch wheel I want to use on this bike. It's 27 1/4 tire. If I checked it, it is dished and true. So that's an important thing. Here's the Bridgestone's fork. If you put the wheel in, it sits a little crooked in here. So this fork is out of a whack. And we got to figure out how and why. So that's something we're going to do. I also cleaned up an old headset that we're going to put in this bike that I think is also GIS. This frame should be GIS. And here's my weird, wacky, I've never used before headset press. So somebody's homemade, it's a piece of like a long bolt or a piece of all thread, some nuts and some washers to space it out. We're just going to pinch it in, the cups in there, tighten it into the frame, see if it works. I've always used like a big park headset press, but you know, this would be like $4 or $5 at a hardware store. I work in a pinch. I also don't have a crown race press, but I do have the Nishiki time trial down tube that I cut off. That sure seems like it'll fit. So I'm going to whack it like it's the park headset press and see what happens. And here is the Bridgestone frame. I swapped in the seat bolt out of a donor frame. Swapped in the seat post out of another donor frame. It's 26/8. And I think the only kind of cool one I have sitting around. This is the one that I was saying was stuck in a frame when I got it out. But I didn't record that, so I'll have to do that next time. So here's the trick. I guess we're going to see if that crown race will press on, and then we'll see if we can press these headset cups in, and then we'll see if we can line that fork and get them on this old Bridgestone. For the first step, which was pressing in this crown, you see how it's knurled? See those lines in it? This crown was damaged at one point. It was too small, or cut too small, or ridden loose. So someone clamped a little knurling machine on, which raises up, it pushes down the metal and raises up these ridges to bring it back up to size. So that crown race almost sits on there. There's a couple millimeters at the bottom they missed. So really it's only going to ride on that, which doesn't really matter. So I'm betting the crown race will go on nice and easy. The headset, probably guys have used 2x4s and hammers and weird crappy bolts forever to press on headsets, so we'll see if it does it. The aligning the fork was going to be the trick. If I can do it at home, that'd be cool. We'll see if we can figure out some home ways and not use an actual like fork jig or fork alignment table or whatever. If not, I'll take it and use a fork alignment table and do it correctly. Okay, so I'm going to do this fork crown, and what I'm going to use is this old crappy like bike mount. You like mount this in the bed of a truck or something. I like this because I think it's less likely to damage the fork tips or the dropouts. So I use this whenever I'm doing any real work on a fork. You can clamp this in the vise, you can hammer on it, like whatever. You can probably get away with just using some rags and a soft chunk of 2x4 or whatever, but I have this, I always use it, why wouldn't I use it? Got just a random chunk of wood. This is the crown race I want to go onto the fork. So just drop that dude on. Next is the old dead crown race off a different fork. I like to put these on upside down, just so it'll only damage this top lip if something does get damaged and not damage the bearing surface at all. Just dropping that dude on. Use this old aluminum down tube, or you can use a fancy part. Oh, water bottle bosses on that side. And I'm just going to tap it a few times until the ting changes. It should go ting, 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 like, it's like you know it's actually set. I can't really tell, but let's take a look. It probably happened on the first hit, that's why I can't really tell. Oh yeah. Always save an old 27.0 GIS crown race for working on old junk. The fancy part tool comes with a bunch of adapters. They're all for aluminum headsets and steel bearings, and you just mangle the shit out of them. So I don't even use them on this old steel stuff. So you can see that is on there, nice and even and smooth all the way around the whole fork crown. This thing, there's no gaps. It's not jacked up a millimeter. You can't see like a little bit of daylight over here and real tight over there. It's nice and even. It went right on like it was supposed to. So step one done. Next we'll see if we can press those cups in. Now I already took a rag and some simple green and kind of cleaned out this tube. any gunk or anything junky in there out. It looks pretty clean and nice. I'm just going to put a little fresh grease in to help. Just a little bit. If the cups just fall right in, they might be the wrong size. There might be two sizes. There's like a 30.0 and like a 30.2. Don't quote me on that, but something like that. So the old GIS is the smaller cups. If someone reamed this out to the more modern ISO, GIS is only like 70s and 80s Japanese bikes. So someone reamed this thing out to take a modern headset like a Chris King or a Campanolo or a Ritchie or anything modern for when it's threaded. They might just fall right in. Or if this thing's been damaged from the fork being loose, like the bottom one especially might kind of slide right in too easy, so we kind of tight. That's a whole other thing. What I do with that is take a little nail or a little punch and a hammer and go around. And just sort of how that fork crown was knurled, the metal was pushed down so the metal around it would push up. The little nail or a little punch will do the same thing right around just where the headset cup presses in. You press down the nail and it'll make little volcano fingers pop up around it in metal. So it'll give something for the headset cup to really grip onto. And yes, that is kind of common on beater old bikes. So I got the bottom headset cup on the bottom, a bunch of washers. It looks like these will just miss the bearing surface if I'm careful. Let's show close. So it's almost up in that bearing surface. So if I really let it off and crook it, it might damage it. So I gotta be kind of careful this is even. Put the rustiest, grossest part of the headset in the very back. Oh, this bolt is nowhere near long enough for this frame. Oh, it is just too short, man. And once we press this one in, there'll be even less room for the next one. Old guys say they just hammer these in with a nice soft piece of wood all the time. Let's try it. Looks really close. So this is the first time I've ever done that. But as long as it's the same thing, as long as it's perfectly flush all the way around, it's probably fine. Clean that grease off and really look. And it looks totally fine. Alright. New stuff. Always been paranoid and use fancy tools, but here we are. That soft piece of wood should mar and not damage this nice thick chrome metal cup. Maybe this would be a little trickier on an alloy headset. Maybe I wouldn't recommend that. I'm going to feel better if I flip this upside down. Okay, upside down. I got this in about as even as I can just by eyeball. Block of wood method. Give it one more just for good measure. Yeah, and by one I usually mean two. Do the same thing. Just going to go right around. Make sure there's no daylight. The headset cup is pressed up tight against that frame all the way around. Sure looks like it. Old block of wood method seemed to work just fine. Okay, so next step I got a big white piece of paper. And a T-square or a flat ruler, anything will work. What we're going to do is try and make something square. So we can actually tell what the heck's going on. Make a Sharpie line all the way up this thing. Is this thing even going to be long enough? Not even close. Really got to use every inch of this paper. I'm going to make a square line off it, so it's going to be totally perpendicular, flat, square, to each other, to itself. And then we need to make the bottom 100 millimeters, so 50 millimeters on each side of the line. Let's show this on camera. So I just drew a long straight line at the bottom. So So this is a perfect right angle, not all wonky, actually square. Whatever it takes to measure out 50 millimeters. I got a dial caliper, so I'll use that. You can use any ruler, any measuring tape. I'm going to put it right on that line. Measure out 50 millimeters and make a big line. Right on that line, 50 millimeters, make a big line. So this is now 100 millimeters. So you can see the long line, the 100 millimeters is your front spacing. The trick is, can we line this fork up? The center of the fork on the top is right at 100. And then it should be centered right through like the brake hole, right through the center of the fork, and we come down here, right to 100. Just lean over and eyeballing it. We're not real close, but there's no such thing as perfect. And this really lines up. It looks like the whole thing might be pushed over a millimeter or two this way, but you know, that could just be operating error on my part. I'm going to use this, use anything, a pencil. I'm going to use this piece of all thread, stick it in the dropouts, see what they look like. They look lined up too. This fork is really close. So what I'm thinking is maybe the whole thing's over a little bit, or maybe one of the blades is just slightly off from the other one. So I need to find a real flat surface to check that. So I usually use like the edge of a flat table. I use the whole frame alignment table. You could probably use a glass table. And we'll lay it down so the edge of the table is touching the fork crown. And all this mess just hanging off and hanging off. And with the edge of the table lay on the fork crown, it should just balance there, and both these dropouts should touch the table together. You'll know the fork is crooked if the crown is touching flat. You look down the table, only one of the dropouts is touching flat, the other one's like lifted way up or way down or something. So here's what I mean. It's laying on this glass table, which is for all intents and purposes pretty flat. So I've just the crown, so it's touching on both sides here. And this is all hanging off, so this is messing it up. We can cruise down the old blades and see if either of them rocks. And they don't. So this fork is not tweaked. So if anything, I'm still thinking it might be slightly over, or maybe it's just the dropouts need a little bit of aligning. So the next step is I'm going to clamp this in the stand, put that wheel in, check it with some dropout alignment tools, and possibly bend these blades over just a little bit. Maybe one of them got bent slightly out and they bent the wrong one over to make it 100 again. Throw this wheel that we checked is dished and true into the frame. Now you can look and see there's a physical difference. This side's nice and loose. This side's a little tight. You can measure off of there. You can use some calipers, and sometimes it's easier to measure off the other side to the middle of the blade. Measure off the other side of the middle of the blade. Look at that. You can see there's definitely a couple of millimeters. It's too tight over here. This whole wheel has to come over. First thing I'm going to check is the dropout alignment. These are nice old VAR dropout alignment tools. There's a zillion companies, cheap and expensive, making one similar to it. You really will need these if you're going to do a lot of work on old bikes. These are cool because they have all these different spacers on here. So with no spacer, it's 100 millimeters. This big fat spacer, it makes it 120 millimeters for like old rear ends, track bikes, vintage race bikes, 5 speeds. And then I got these washers, so it can go 120 to 126, 130, 135. So again, 100. Now it's 120. Now it's 126. Now it's 130. Now it's 135. Very cool. These didn't come with the washers. Old mechanic went to a hardware store and found washers with exactly the right thicknesses to be able to do that. Alright, so they're a little teeny bit wonky. You can see a little gap there. You can see a little gap. It's a little bigger down there. A little smaller up here. This one sticks out a little bit. It is so close. Might just try aligning these to make this gap even all the way around, make these tools touch perfect, and check the wheel again. So it's over too far this way, there's that gap. So maybe what we'll do is lift this guy, push down on the handle, try and get rid of that gap. Same thing over here. It's a lot easier when this steer tube is really clamped down to an alignment table, so it can't move. Oh, too much. Not good. You don't want to bend things back and forth more than they have to. Sometimes you just hold the other side and just push while you wait on this side. It's getting a lot better. It's almost perfect. Throw this wheel back in and check. If you're not sure if your wheel is perfectly aligned or dished, you can put the wheel on this side, pull it out, flip it around, and see if the gap stays on the same side or if it's following the wheel. It's best to have a wheel that you know is perfectly aligned and dished. Also, putting the dropouts in weird and bent like that, put weird pressure points on that high spot on your hub bearings and cause things to wear out. And that made it not better. See, looking in here, you can look at a line on the top of the tire, line of that center hole for the brake bolt. This is like way off. It might have made it worse. There we go. Oh, that's real tight. That is worse. Flip this wheel around. Even though I know I checked it for true and dish. It's always good to double check as long as you don't end up chasing your tail. Uh-oh. You can always check the dropouts, make sure there's not a big burr or chunk of dirt in there that's throwing you off. That has absolutely happened to me. You can't get the wheel up in enough. Same thing on the axle, the wheel you're using, make sure there's not some big giant thing making it sit crooked. It's a lot easier to get dirt off now than it is to bend the fork and bend it back once you realize your mistake. So we want to drop down on the non-drive side. See, it's way over to the left. You can't really lift this up, we can drop it down. Or, I mean, worst case, we could file in here, file the drop out a little higher so it sits higher, but if you start filing things before you know what's going on, you're definitely doing the wrong thing in the wrong order. So I put it back on my little drawing. Take another look. Back on our little drawing. Real close to center. Real close to center. No, one upside down. Center. Center. Wow, it says it's spot on now. But I mean, this is the line on a piece of paper. I'll line this up center, line the hole up center on this line. These guys line right up at 100. I put this little rod in the dropouts and lift up. I can eyeball it right down that axle line. And it is straight. I really don't think this fork needs to be bent. It might need a little filing, which I said not to do. One last check. Totally centered. Totally centered. From every angle. Totally centered. Huh? And now it's telling me it's way off. You know, I'm going to bend it for the camera because it's fun, because I'm curious. So it's saying it is over to the non-drive side a few millimeters on both blades. Sometimes it can be bent at the crown for bad wreck or something. So it's over this way. Oh, that is the drive side, not the non-drive side. So both blades need to move in towards the non-drive side. Both blades need to go towards the non-drive side a couple of millimeters. So I'm going to try just pulling it a little. And it's just going to want to turn. I don't know if it moved. Let's check and see what this spacing is. Space still at 100. I wonder if this handy dandy down tube will come in handy for this again too. Oh, almost. If I had another one, I'd bend this a little bit so up over these dropouts and I can yank it. Maybe we will. Now it's telling me it's perfect again. So just gonna triple check it. Totally on the center up here. Totally on center. Totally on center. And it's over again. So this is pretty hard to get it pretty accurate. Still think they both want to go in towards the drive side. It does make a tool for this. It's a big giant lever arm that goes up here that you can pivots against the top of the fork and holds against here. You can bend it out. I sold mine with everything else. So I'm going to try making this fit a little different. I just took my cheater bar to the vise and smashed it a little bit. Oh, and it still won't fit up. Well, almost. Let's try it. Ah, this side fits all the way up. What the? Okay, a little smashy, a little double checky. Still at 100 millimeters. And it looks like nothing has changed. Too tight on the drive side. Moving over. You drop the non-drive down like 2 millimeters. It's straight. This fork is tougher than I thought, man. Maybe it's some real chromo or something. Thought it wasn't because of these dropouts. That, I think that moved a whole bunch. Sure did. Pull this side over a little bit too. So now we're nowhere near 100 anymore. Not really any closer. Let's try pulling this guy in a little more. Let's turn this back to camera. Yeah, we're way out. I think this side came out. I don't think this side is followed. We'll loosen this quick release so we can stick it up here and see. But yeah, it looks, if I just hold it up against this dropout, it looks a lot better. So I just got to try and get this one to come back over however much I bent this one out, 2 to 4 millimeters. We'll just keep trying. Because on a frame alignment table, it's going to take me 30 seconds. So I'm going to bolt it down so tight. Nope. Still didn't move over. kind of twist and come forward instead of just coming over. The whole fork is turning. Oh, and we came over. We're back at 100. The wheel just fits in perfect. It's a lot better. So much better, but is it perfect? Oh yeah, nice big gap on this side now. It is perfect now. But we have to hope that we didn't bend the dropouts front and rear, so we'll do another table test real quick. Check these dropout alignments. So really, we start getting into frame mods and alignment, frame builder stuff, it's a lot of just checking and double checking, but I guess it's what a lot of bike stuff is. Yeah, these guys aren't aligned perfectly anymore, but before I align them, I'm going to make sure these fork blades are still aligned. So, back up to the kitchen table. Now we're back up here doing the table test. I'll show you what I mean. So the crown's nice and tight. It's only touching at the edge of that crown. Come down to the dropouts. Totally cool. And it moves up and down a little bit. So we didn't just bend the fork in, we bent it back a little bit on accident. So I'm gonna have to pull this blade very slightly forward. So this is the drive side, the left side when it's in the stand. I'm gonna pull it forward just a bit, or we could pull the other one back a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna bend this one forward, but sometimes something won't move and you'll bend the other one back and it will move. Usually it's the one that moved will do what you want, because metal sort of has a memory and it's fighting against its nature to go the wrong way and fighting for its nature to go back the right way. So we will see. Just going to give it a little tiny bend. Real tight. And now we'll go double check again. I wish there was sort of an easier way. But I guess jogging up and down the stairs 20 times to do this is great. Woohoo! So we bent that blade forward. Tight. And it is perfect. Neither of them have any play. There's no wiggle. It's at least as flat as this glass table, which are usually flat enough. Now you might ask yourself, like, this is supposed to be 45 millimeters of rake from the factory, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? As long as it's straight in a line, the wheel rides straight. I don't care if it's going to be 43. I don't care if it's going to be 47. Or if it's right at 45, it's close enough. No one can tell the difference. It's fine. It's all done. But we're still not done. Let's check the alignment. One more, and hopefully the last time. Hopefully that wheel sits straight, because we know everything is straight as it can possibly get with just a piece of paper and our eyeballs and the kitchen table. So now you can see that gap is all goofy. It's a little big on the back too. So we're going to align these dudes. Yoink! I have to be careful with these old VAR ones because someone filed some like wrench flats in them to fit really old undersized axle wheels. So I gotta make sure that they're both sitting on the roundest part and not on the wrench flats, or let them sit up and goofy. Usually pretty good about that, but I'm just gonna double check. Yep. Because some really vintagey wheels are like 9mm axles instead of 10 or whatever. You can see it's still a little bit different at the bottom. Usually dropouts is bend. Okay. That's so much closer, still a little gap. I think this guy's got to come up. Come on, you dink. Ugh. Stop moving, man. It is so close to perfect. There's no such thing as actually perfect. But if you look around, yeah, the gap might be a little bit bigger on the bottom, but almost imperceptibly. Can't even get my fingernail in. They're real lined up all the way around. No lip anywhere, nice and smooth, and that's what you want. So now, in theory, as long as I mess something up or rebend a blade, they should be aligned, the wheel should sit straight. If the wheel doesn't sit straight, I might scream. I might scream if the wheel's not straight, or I might get the file out. So it sits pretty dang straight. It still looks crooked in my eye. I don't trust myself. So I'm going to take these calipers, squeeze the outside the rim to the outside of the fork blade. I'm going to come over to the other side, do the same thing. Rim to the fork blade. And it is so close. It's so close. I couldn't get that better by hand, goofing and trying. My life depended on it. We're calling her straight. We're calling her good. We'll go test ride the bike, and if it pulls to one side or the other, then we'll know it's not good. But really that only happens when it's like noticeable. Like how it was before, I bet it would pull. Very slightly. Try to ride hands free to pull a little bit to the left the whole time. You're like, hey. So close. It is real tight on this 27, maybe 27. 1.25s aren't the way to go. We'll see how the brake fits. I don't care if someone can get fenders on. They can buy 700C wheels later if they want. Or use a paddle fender. As long as the brake clears, I'm going to call it good, because these wheels are cool for really cheap, shitty wheels with these great brand new tires and tubes and being round and true. Just going to clean them, grease the hubs, but that'll be for a different video. This video, we're going to finish putting this headset together. And now that fork's aligned, back to the easy part, which is just the normal hard stuff, like installing a headset. So we hammered in these cups, we hammered on the crown race, we aligned the fork, which is goofy for a headset install video. And now we're just going to do real normal boring stuff. I'm going to shoot grease around here with this weird kitchen syringe. Same thing down here. Do the step I always forget. Just to pre-grease this crown race. Another step I always forget is to wipe this down as best as you can. Doesn't matter too much, the thread in the cup, so I'll move this grease down where we want it. And I pre-cleaned all these old headset parts before we started. So it's clean. Dropped on, roll into this grease. Drop this guy on. Roll into that grease, get it in there, bud. You need to grease into something dirty. Don't reuse it. Wipe it off and get rid of it. We only want the clean grease. Got this upper cup. Upper cup. Now the fork carefully goes in. Careful. Not being very careful. Got some grease. Wipe it back on these threads. Threading this upper cup on. It's real greasy and I hate it, so I'm going to wipe off the grease where my fingers go. You can always hold the upper cup and spin the fork. Righty-tighty, righty-tighty. Woohoo! And now we are on. Just get it kind of finger tight. It's not going to go any tighter. We got the tooth lock washer. You see the little tooth? And that goes in the little flat spot on the back of the threads in the back of the fork crown. This is so in theory, you can get this bearing adjustment adjusted. The lock nut locks it all down. And instead of, when you try and tighten this lock nut down, instead of the bearing adjustment cup turning as well, the tooth washer will sort of hold it in place and nothing will spin. And if you notice, there's 5 or 6 threads here, there's 5 or 6 threads here. So with any luck, this headset should be exactly the right height. And it is! Magic! If we didn't have enough threads, we could be in trouble, because you won't be able to get the lock nut on. If you have too many threads, the lock nut will bottom out, leaving a big gap. And what we have to do then is put a headset spacer in. You need the lock nut to bottom out on your spacers, not bottom out on the fork. Now this is perfect. Now technically you can try and futz. You can hold this with a 32mm wrench. You tighten the top one. You can never get a headset correct without the wheel and the brake on. So you get it close, and then when you get the wheel and the brake on, we can put it on the ground, we can turn it sideways, we can rock it back and forth, make sure there's no play, tighten it until there's no play, but still spin smooth, and then lock it down. But you'll only be guessing. Same with bottom brackets, and even like rear hubs and stuff. You're really only guessing at the tension until you have that crank arm on there, so you can yank it side to side instead of smoothly front to back to make sure there's no play in there. Check a few angles. So this is it until you have to do the final bearing adjustment. So doing the final build. So that's kind of as close as we can get. I can sort of show you what that's going to look like. You can fake it for now, just don't forget to double check later. So to hold this bottom cup and tighten this top cup. You can see the whole fork's moving and it's moving. You really need the wheel on there. Sometimes I'll have the wheel in the frame and I'll pinch it with my knees so that this fork won't turn. Maybe I'll stick my belly into it. So we just want the top nut to tighten down to hold everything in place. And that almost feels too tight. But like with bottom brackets, they have to feel too tight to your hand. But once the crank's and everything on them, they feel nice and loose. So it's tight enough. We'll do the real double check later. This headset was easy because it didn't have any little dust shields or anything. Some headsets are more complicated to put little seals and spacers and dust shields in. You don't want to mess them up. You don't want them pinched. They're pinched here and they bulge out and tear and want everything to fit right. This is a nice old one and this waterproof grease. I always use a little too much grease, so you can see it sort of smushing out everywhere. That's my little dust shield. That keeps schmutz from getting back up in the headset. So there it is. There's my very weird and convoluted video about how to install a headset the weird home mechanic way in your basement or garage. And now we know this frame is aligned and cool and ready to build. And I got a lot of junk parts. I've stripped like 4 or 5 bikes recently. So I'm going to build this with some cool stuff. Make it about as cool as we can make it. So thanks for watching, guys. And I never remember to say this, but like, comment, and subscribe. I love getting new subscribers. It's a little shot of dopamine every time I get a notification. I like positive comments. I dislike negative comments. But negative ones that are constructively criticism, people who know what they're doing, that's cool. But usually it's people who've never done it, or armchair bike mechanics, or guys who heard something, or don't know the difference between hearsay and what actually works and what doesn't. Get people say that all the time. People ask questions on the home bike mechanic forum on Facebook, and I answer them. And guys are like, "Oh, you clearly never done it. You don't." I'm like, "I've done it 100 times, bud. Like, what are you talking about?" I give advice because sometimes there's 30 comments on a post, and every single one of them is wrong. It's crazy. It's like 30 guys are going to comment, not one's going to tell you the right tool or the right thing or if that'll work or not. So, you know, I'm trying. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. But I've heard a lot of things, and I've tried a lot of things. And I'm not afraid to try new things on junk bikes. Wouldn't do it on expensive, nice bikes. But this was fun getting to hammer in some headset cups, which I've never done before on a junk bike, and not worrying about it. Because there's no amount of money in the world that could have made me do that on one of my $3,000 custom handmade frames. I only used the most expensive fancy headset press. Really watched it to make sure everything's going cool. And, you know, pre-reamed and faced everything with my nice campy tools that I know cut just right. So this is fun again. Do old junk. Thanks for watching. If you look at the end of the video, I have a little thing. This is like March 4th, and we have a swap meet here coming up in Portland on March 18th. Go to it if you see this video and you're in Portland. I don't know if it'll be cool or not. I bet it will. It's inside a brew pub, so it's indoors. It's picnic tables. It's huge and empty space. Walk around drinking, buying bike parts. It's pretty cool. So, thanks for watching.